Welcome to the Archaeology Studio. Today's episode considers the roles of archaeology in a museum in terms of exhibit, curation, and storage. Most visitors at a museum would see only the exhibit areas intended for the public, yet people generally are aware that many other responsibilities proceed behind the scenes outside the public view at a museum. This video concentrates on how archaeology can influence or improve the functions of exhibit, curation, and storage related with a museum. In my view, the central or permanent exhibit of a museum should involve a chronological narrative of what happened through time. You can see examples of the objects that have been found for each time period, and you can see how those objects contributed to the basic outline of a chronological narrative. You will not see every artifact fragment or every piece of midden debris. Rather, you will see the representative examples that convey the most information and context. Ideally, you could pursue more information beyond the museum exhibit that you can see, but the exhibit itself needs to fit within its practical limits. This basic format of a chronological narrative can work effectively with archaeology as long as the exhibit follows the real factual evidence. In this case, the material findings of archaeology come first, and then the exhibit can follow the chronological outline. When a museum exhibit fails to follow the archaeological evidence, then at best, the chronological narrative becomes incomplete or coarse in its scale. For instance, the past could be represented in just one or two time periods, and some time periods might be missing. More problematic, though, are the exhibits that interpret the past through a historical or modern perspective, rather than allowing the factual evidence to present itself in its own natural chronological order and context. Of course, archaeological research continues to make new discoveries every year. Therefore, a museum exhibit should be assessed at least once per year in order to update the facts, and especially to evaluate the interpretations that may have become outdated or proven to be incorrect. If an exhibit simply follows a factual chronological presentation, then new material findings easily can be added for refining the details of the exhibit. On the other hand, if an exhibit includes more interpretive aspects and perspective, then new archaeological findings quite easily could make the exhibit obsolete. When developing a core permanent exhibit, I advise to start with the archaeological evidence of a chronological order of time periods, and then you can consider how to present the information of each time period in natural order, starting with the oldest and continuing through the most recent. A museum exhibit can bring visitors face to face with real objects from the past. You can appreciate the details and the physical presence in ways that might not be possible through reading a book or watching an online video. Nonetheless, printed book catalogs, digital imagery databases, and video documentary projects can be accessed by anyone around the world, while a museum exhibit might not be accessible realistically for everyone. For these reasons, a museum exhibit usually is designed in parallel with a printed, digital, or video version of the exhibit that potentially could explore different kinds of information beyond the traditional museum exhibit. When physical objects are included in a museum exhibit, then in a sense they are being curated. Curation refers to the care for artifacts and objects, including their physical storage, management of associated information, and ability to organize and present the results of studies of those objects. The results of study could identify the objects that would be most suitable in a museum exhibit. In this formulation, the archaeological studies would need to occur first, and then the relevant objects and information could be selected for an exhibit. In most cases, the complete inventories of archaeological artifacts, written and associated records by far exceed the items that you would see inside a traditional museum exhibit. Most of the material that goes into a curation process includes small fragments and broken pieces of pottery, stone tools, food remains, and other materials, as well as photographs, maps, illustrations, data tables, text records, technical reports, and academic publications. As mentioned here, only very few of those items that go into a curation process ever would be seen in a museum exhibit. Sometimes those objects and records could be curated in a different part of a museum, separate from the public exhibit areas. More often, though, the curation occurs somewhere else, and the curation may not even be related with the museum. Ideally, the curation process would maintain the relevant archaeological information for supporting future research and for supporting factual basis for new museum exhibits. I should mention that often archaeological objects and records simply are in storage, not necessarily meeting the standards for a curation process. Simple physical storage, of course, constitutes an essential part of curation, but curation involves much more in terms of managing, organizing, and supporting potential new use of the curated materials. Without the contribution of archaeology, what might happen in the storage, curation, and exhibits at a museum? What are your thoughts about these issues? What would you like to see in another video? Please remember to subscribe to this channel, share with your friends, and explore more online videos with the Archaeology Studio.